Welcome into NFL Kickoff Live. This will be the best 2 hours of football talk every single Friday. We'll go around the NFL, talk about every team and every game, and we'll get local insight you can't get anywhere but right here on Locked On. I am your host, Tanitra Batiste. Alongside me is Jarvis Davis and Kyle Krabs. Let's go straight to Thursday Night Football, where the Giants did their best to keep up, but sorry, just couldn't.
The San Francisco 49ers remain perfect in 2023, beating the New York Giants in prime time 30-12 Thursday night. Hey, everybody, I'm Brian Peacock, host of Locked On 49ers. And Brock Purdy, San Francisco 49ers young quarterback, weathered a storm from New York Giants defensive coordinator Don Martindale. The Giants blitzed Brock Purdy on nearly 85% of his dropbacks, the highest percentage in the next-gen stats era. And Brock Purdy, despite some early hiccups, was up to the challenge and actually ended up with a career-high 310 passing yards in this one, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and it was playmaker Deebo Samuel, the du jour for the 49ers, who have no shortage of playmakers on offense. 6 catches, 129 yards, and a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey got into the end zone as well, as the 49ers rolled to a 30-12 win and are now in control in the NFC West and really just rolling 30 points for the 3rd straight game in week 3.
The New York Giants dropped the 30-12 decision to the San Francisco 49ers on Thursday Night Football. And any momentum that the Giants had found in the second half of last week's come-from-behind win over the Arizona Cardinals went out the window thanks to a sluggish showing by the offense. New York only managed 150 net yards in 20 minutes and 50 seconds of play versus the 49ers, who racked up 441 yards in just over 39 minutes. The Giants' defense wasn't much better. New York struggled to get off the field on 3rd down, allowing 9 of 16 for a 56% conversion rate. The defense was also guilty of several missed tackles, including 4 on a third-quarter 40-yard catch and run by receiver Deebo Samuel on a drive that ended in a 21-yard 49ers field goal that made it a 20-12 game at the time. The 1-2 New York Giants now have 11 days to figure things out before they have to next take the field. That will come on, of course, October 2nd, Monday Night Football at home against the Seattle Seahawks.
You know, it was scary if you are a Giants fan to see what you saw last night. I don't know if 11 days is going to make a difference. If you're a 49ers fan, it was a good look, and the rest of the NFC should probably be afraid.
Yeah, Tanitra, I think it's not surprising to find out that the Giants struggled offensively the way that they did without Saquon Barkley and Andrew Thomas, who, if we're being honest, are their 2 best players on that side of the football. But talk about an all-time tough draw to get San Francisco in San Francisco with that defense, with how good that they are playing. Doesn't seem to matter who's really calling the plays. San Francisco's talent foundation defensively is just so strong. And you saw Nick Bosa show up with that sack that nearly resulted in a safety, and Fred Warner's flying around, and Noah Hufanga flying from depth. Not the game to not have your 2 best players on the offensive side of the ball. And I think the Giants called the game accordingly. You know, you looked up and you're kind of hanging around there for a little bit, but I'm not surprised they didn't have the horses. And if you're looking for what difference can 11 days make, maybe you get those guys back. And Saquon Barkley, he shared in the pregame show, I believe he shared it with Taylor Rooks, that he actually does have a high ankle sprain. So that is some cause for concern about what availability he's going to have. But that's what I'm looking to if I'm a Giants fan, saying, okay, we got to get this thing right. Let's get these best players on the field.
I know our producer certainly hopes so, Kyle. But Jarvis, what did you see last night in terms of just the dominance that we saw from the 49ers versus, say, the Giants, who looked to stop that domination for a moment in time, and then they just couldn't?
I think, Brock Purdy, was the way he was able to get rid of the football. I was just I was very impressed by that, because, we talked about, on the previous show about how am I a believer in Brock Purdy? I'm not saying I'm a believer, but I understand. I understand why San Francisco had so much conviction about him. I understand why they went ahead and moved on from Trey Lance and kind of took the brunt of the criticism that wasn't as great as we thought it would be. But so I think that Brock Purdy, even though Wink Martindale was throwing everything under the sun at him, as far as from a pressure standpoint, he was just exactly knew exactly where he was going with the football. As soon as that ball was snapped, it's almost like it was predetermined, because he gets that offense. He understands that offense, and obviously Kyle Shanahan is putting him in a great position to be able to make those plays.
Kyle, did you see something in San Fran that made you think not just NFC, but that they're maybe one of the top 3 teams in the league overall?
Yeah, I definitely think from a talent perspective, and look, San Francisco didn't have Brandon Ayuk in this game either. So, you talk about talent that's not on the field offensively. San Francisco had their fair share too. And I'm glad Jarvis mentioned, how Brock Purdy played the game, because I do think they called that game for San Francisco. And this is where Kyle Shanahan's great. And this is why I do think they're a top 3 team in the conference. They know what their players are. They play to their players' strengths. Brock Purdy came out kind of hot. He was missing some throws, and they dialed him back in. They called some screen passes. They got the ball easy into Deebo Samuel's hands with manufactured touches. They got it into Christian McCaffrey's hands with manufactured touches. And then next thing you know, Brock Purdy's throwing hot against pressure on a speed out in the end zone to Ronnie Bell for a touchdown. And it's that encapsulation of they put the bumpers on him when they need to, because he's still a young player. He only has 8 career starts. But then you see these flashes where it's like he gets the offense, and it doesn't always look pretty. It's not always perfect, but it's what we talked about last week, where you in a vacuum doesn't really matter so much as you amongst what your team is trying to achieve offensively. And I think the fact that Brock gets it with the offense does have me in a position to say, this is probably a top 2 team in the NFC conference. And then you look over at the other side of the fence. I do think right now this is a top 3 team. Now it's a marathon, but I'd put them in that stratosphere right now. Absolutely.
Now, Jarvis, when something that Kyle made a good point about, when you look at the team in all fairness, and you look at the game in all fairness, yes, the Giants didn't have Saquon Barkley, but 49ers didn't have Brandon Ayuk. And you look across the entire league, and there are some issues all the way around when it comes to injuries. We, of course, heard, I believe, I'll say the biggest injury, maybe because of how well they're playing as a team, would be Trevon Diggs with the Cowboys. But we're also looking at 2 rookie QBs and Anthony Richardson in concussion protocol, and now Bryce Young going down. So early in the season, so many injuries. Is that something that really has you kind of scratching your head and kind of wondering if that's really going to be one of the big factors in determining who ends up on top at the end of the season?
I mean, I think it's always been like that. I just think that, being that all of these injuries are happening so early on, I feel like, it's a little bit overstated, I believe. But I think just as to a reason why, here's my scenario. How about the fact that they don't play real football until game 1? They barely hit in practice, if at all. And then a lot of teams, or even down here in Atlanta, Arthur Smith, played the starting offense for 17 plays. How can you get ready to play football by practicing football? You get ready to play real football by playing real football in those real games when the quarterback can go to the ground. The quarterback understands, that is the opposing defense, and he can put me on my behind if I don't get rid of this rock. So I think that being able to, get into a rhythm, not only just to be able to establish a rapport with wide receivers and defensively, that's why you see the defenses are getting off to a pretty solid start. Because, those guys are able to just, you get down there and you go. But if you're not experiencing those hits, experiencing those things through 4 quarters, your body isn't going to be used to it. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now when you're talking about all these guys getting injured and everything like that. And so many guys are having to step in and like a Bell, a late round draft pick out of Michigan. He has to come and step in and be that guy, because guess what? He played a lot during the preseason because rookies got to play, because you got to make the club. So I think that's why you see some of those guys, some of these names we never heard of, or like Puka Nacua up in with the Rams. Those guys are stepping in and making plays because they've been playing. They've been playing real football. So I think that's what we're kind of experiencing at this moment.
And the NFLPA will probably have a little something to say about that. We've already heard a little chirping about it as it relates to conditions on certain football fields being an issue or a concern as well. So we'll be following this story throughout the rest of the season. Now, listen, in New York, they're following the Jets to see if the Jets are going to jet. We'll talk about it in a minute. But first, Jarvis, let's talk game time.
All right, folks, y'all listen up. I'll tell you about some game time, man. You know, you talking about all that planning and stuff. You know, your wife trying to say, hey, we need to plan 2 weeks ahead so we can go to the game and get some tickets. Bump all that. I need you to go to game time because wait till the last minute and go get these tickets. They're going to, I promise you, they're going to guarantee you some great deals because the tickets are right up to the day of the event, right? And you can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So yeah, you can go to the game, get you some really good tickets, and then you can, you know, sweeten the deal, sweeten the pot with your wife and say, hey, baby, I'm gonna get these theater tickets right here. And we're not planning that either. You know, we're being spontaneous. You know, that's how you sell it. So yeah, I need you to go to Game Time, guys. And here's what all you need to do. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Yes, you heard that correctly. $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Go ahead and download that Game Time app today. Be spontaneous. Get some cool points with your wife or your spouse or however you get down and get those last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed.
Now, Jarvis and Kyle, do you remember what you were doing on December 27, 2015? I know I don't, but Jets fans probably do because that's the last time the New York Jets beat the New England Patriots. Jets, of course, don't have Aaron Rodgers, but do they have enough to finally beat their division rivals? Well, John Butchko from Locked On Jets and Mike Devate from Locked On Patriots break down if they see the streak ending this week.
Would you like to offer a score prediction today for the outcome on Sunday in East Rutherford?
Well, maybe this is wishful thinking. Maybe this is me being a homer, although I did pick against the Jets last weekend. I picked for a closer game than they got, but I do think the Jets will win this game. I think that they'll finally break this long losing streak that they have against the Patriots. I like the way this defense is going to respond. I think that this defense is kind of built to contain the New England offense. I think that, as Sauce Gardner said, this is not necessarily the most explosive offense in the league. They're very well coached. They execute at a high level. But I think this is the type of offense the Jets defense is built to kind of slow down. I think on the other side of the ball, you'll see a relatively conservative game plan. I worry about Zach Wilson. I think if Zach Wilson can play turnover-free football, the Jets are going to have a really good chance at winning this game. I think, so I think it's kind of a coin flip game. These are two tough teams. I think these teams may be combined for a 1-3 record. I think these are both really solid football teams. I mean, look at the opponents they've played so far. Can you have a tougher schedule than these two teams through the first 2 weeks? Patriots getting Philadelphia and Miami, Jets getting Buffalo and Dallas. I think these are two quality football teams that will be in the playoff race. I think the Jets will still be in the playoff race near the end of the season, even without Aaron Rodgers. I think the Patriots will be right there. I think that the Jets figure out a way. I think Zach Wilson finally avoids the big mistake. So I'll take the Jets 17, the Patriots 14. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I'll definitely take the under on that. I think the Jets eke one out at home.
Folks, this is the fourth year that John and I have been doing crossovers together, and you can tell we think alike and share half of the same brain. I also have this game going 17-14 because I do think it's going to be a defensive slugfest. I'm going to pull out the homer card on this one and say the New England Patriots pull this out. And the reason I do believe that is because I think the Patriots are going to win the turnover battle this week. And I think that's going to be key for them to be able to move forward and try to salvage right now what a season could be. If they're 1-2, all of a sudden it gives them a little bit of life. 0-3 in this division is really, I think, the kiss of death. And New England knows that their backs are up against the wall. I think they're going to have everything in their arsenal at their disposal this weekend, and they're going to need it. That means that Mac Jones is probably going to play a very conservative game, trying to hit the inner part, the intermediate areas of the field. Short passes down the field, lead the receiver under the defense where they can get it, and then get yards after the catch. They have to use the run to be able to open things up. they're going to have a very difficult time against this defense, who I think guys, especially in that secondary, like Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, are going to really make things difficult on the Patriots pass catchers, especially deep. So it's going to be imperative for the Patriots to win the short game battle. I think they do it, and I think they pull this one out 17-14. But like you said, John, this is a coin flip. It would not shock me to see it go the other way. The Jets have an extremely talented team. Aaron Rodgers or no Aaron Rodgers, this is still a formidable matchup for the New England Patriots, and one they have to be very, very careful for, because the Jets can take it to you in so many different ways.
And interestingly, both of these teams, we're going to see a lot of punts on Sunday. Both of these teams in the last 2 years have won a game on a punt return touchdown. Now, not such a pleasant memory for the Jets, because it happened when these two teams met last year. But week one, the Jets won on the Xavier Gibson punt return touchdown. So special teams could be an X factor in this one, Mike, as it always is when these teams meet.
Absolutely. Just ask Brendan Schooler how important special teams were. The only reason why Patriots fans have any smiles this week is because of that move around the edge to be able to block Jason Sanders' field goal attempt last week. The Patriots always have a wrinkle up their sleeve when it comes to special teams, and the Jets are very well coached in that area as well. Great X factor, John.
So we have the good fortune of having Mr. Locked On Dolphins himself right next to me, Kyle. And so, Kyle, you are very familiar with this particular division, and it kind of feels like right now it's the Dolphins and Bills, and then it's the other three, right? So what is it going to take, starting with the Jets, what is it going to take for them to get a W, and is that going to be something that lays at the feet of Zach Wilson?
I just need 1 minute, if you don't mind, to fully bask in Mike of Locked On Patriots talking about, as the Patriots, a consolation prize of smiling over a blocked field goal in a loss. What a time to be alive.
Wow.
But I digress.
Absolutely.
Denitra, your question was about the New York Jets and their ability to win the football game. Zach Wilson needs to not do the things that Zach Wilson has done pretty much any opportunity he's had since he came into the NFL. So I know the optimism was, well, Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers, and they've remade and fixed Zach Wilson. Why watch Zach Wilson go 12 of 27 and throw 3 picks last week? So at the end of the day, the New England Patriots play a very specific brand of football, which is we are close to the vest and we will let you beat yourself. The Jets can't beat themselves. So can you run the ball? What's the status of Dwayne Brown at left tackle? We don't know right now. You need to run the ball. You need to be able to give the ball to what you paid Dalvin Cook to come here to do, what you drafted Breece Hall to come here to do. You guys have to run the football and turn this into a grinded out game, because I do think the Jets have better defensive talent. The Patriots are really banged up in the secondary coming out of that week 2 game against Miami. I think if you're able to run the ball, the Jets have better healthy and available defensive personnel. But if you play field position and get caught up and try to do something or be something that you want it to be, but you can't be because Aaron Rodgers is hurt, the Patriots are exactly that team that is just going to lie in the grass and wait. And then when you let your guard down or you try to do something ambitious, they will jump on you and they'll probably win the football game because.
Now, Jarvis, it sounds like KC is saying, don't leave this game at the foot of Zach Wilson, but should the Patriots and Bill Belichick count on Mac Jones to be the one to get it done for them?
No, not really, to be honest with you. I think that Ramondre Stevenson is more than capable of carrying this team to a win, because at the end of the day, like, Bill O'Brien brought some stability to this offense. What did I just wait? Bill O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien and
did I just say that? Yes. Like, how does that go together in the sense? But I think that given what they were dealing with last year, and I ain't gonna even mention the coach's name, we already know who we're talking about. A first-time offensive coordinator, play caller ever, getting the opportunity to call plays for a young quarterback. I think that was just the worst situation Bill Belichick can put his quarterback in, and I don't think enough people have said that, just from a general manager standpoint. So I think that this game is going to be a grinded out. I wholeheartedly agree with KC. This is going to be a grinded out, pounded out game, and I wouldn't be surprised if they don't combine for more than 30 points in this game, because this is going to be something that, the Jets, Robert Saleh, he understands who Zach Wilson is. He's going to make sure that Nathaniel Hackett doesn't put this game in the hands of Zach Wilson. And I think know for a fact that Bill Belichick is not going to put this game in Mac Jones's hands, and he's not going to allow Bill O'Brien to do that either. So I think this is going to be something that it might be a game-winning punt returns that actually who gets the dub in this one.
Indeed. Now you're looking at not putting either one of those teams and getting a W at the feet of those quarterbacks, but other than last week and the week before, anytime anyone would have said, put the game on the line and give the ball to Joe Burrow, everyone would have said that's a dub for the Bengals, right? But this season, it has been a struggle for Joe Burrow that is really a head scratcher, if you will. And so that's one of those teams, you know how we talk about teams that are 2-0 going into week 3, and they're a little bit surprising. Well, the Bengals are a surprise going 0-2. Granted, they played the Browns, and the Browns kind of smoked them. That was questionable. The Ravens, that's always going to be a back and forth for that AFC North. And now they've got the Rams, which might be an opportunity for Joe Burrow to kind of get back on track. But will this be the time where we end up seeing Joe Cool come back to his Joe Cool self?
Well, I guess what's tough is he re-aggravated the calf. If we didn't have to deal with that re-aggravation, I'm looking at this game and I'm feeling, really good. You might get a lot of points in this game, but I would expect the Bengals to outscore the Rams just based off of that depth chart right now is Aaron Donald and Ernest Jones and a bunch of first and second year guys, right? Like they got a ton of young guys on that depth chart. And some of them are playing really well, but they're still inexperienced versus the chemistry that you would expect Cincinnati to have. But JD talked about in the first segment, Bengals, Joe Burrow didn't play. He didn't play the entire preseason. He missed almost all training camp with the calf strain, had to get carted off. We were all freaking out about that. And I think it's just another testament of that. And you feel for Joe because he had appendicitis one year in the preseason. And it's just always been something for Joe coming into a year. So I don't think that we're necessarily in uncharted waters with a timing, chemistry, ball placement, not a lot of exotic scheme, but really just we're going to bank on our chemistry with quarterback and wide receivers, getting that reignited. And that's how we beat you. That's usually what they do. And not having the time, I'm not surprised with that. But is Joe Burrow going to play? What are the Bengals signed Reed Sinnett as a potential backup quarterback if Joe Burrow can't go? And as I'm sitting here really trying to wrap my head around that, if Joe Burrow doesn't play, I can't pick the Bengals to win the game. We just don't know.
You really can't. You really can't because DeMar Chase and T. Higgins really, they don't have that chemistry with whether it's whomever it is, a guy not named Joe Burrow, right? Could be Jake Browning as well, I think is on their depth chart. But here's one of those situations where normally we would not say that it's going to be Joe Mixon. We wouldn't say that it's going to be the run game that's actually going to save the Bengals. But in this case, Jarvis, I feel like Joe Mixon in that run game, they're going to have to really step up and do some things because you're not going to be able to count on, definitely if Joe Burrow doesn't go, you're not going to be able to count on somebody that just walked into the practice room a couple days ago and is just now starting to catch up on schemes through films, etc. And the Bengals are going to need that defense to step up.
Yeah, and I think it starts with running the football, right? Because that offense didn't get going, early on until they started giving the rock to Joe Mixon, whether it be passing to him out of the backfield or just handing it off to him. Because Joe Mixon is a very good running back. So I think that, I get all the, the pretty weapons all on the outside, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. You brought in Irv Smith at tight end. Yeah, that's all cute. That's real cute. But at the end of the day, when things are slow, when things are not working out how you want to in the passing game, you can always count on that running game, especially when you have a guy of Joe Mixon's ilk back there waiting to put that ball in his hand. So I think that, if they are able to, get, whether or not Joe Burrow plays, they still need to make sure they are implementing Joe Mixon into this offense because here's the thing. That is what's going to ease him into the season. Like Casey mentioned, you have those instances where he's always dealing with something coming into the year. How about handing that bad boy off? And so he won't have to take that many hits or give him to him in a play action or give him to him some screen, give him some easy throws, get him going, and then you start going up top to your pretty guys outside on the outside of the those hash marks. So I think that If they're able to get that running game popping off, I really feel like they'll have a chance. But if Joe Burrow doesn't play like everyone has said on this show, yeah, I don't know what that offense is going to look like. No clue whatsoever.
Sounds like we don't know.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
So here's my concern with getting the running game going for Cincinnati. And I agree with you, JD. They're in 11 personnel 90% of the time on first down. They're in the shotgun 97% of the time through their first 2 games on first down.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to do that, and I agree, you got to change some of what you're doing. You got to get up under center. You got to get some heavier personnel out there so that you can create gaps in space. Because if you're going to go spread 11 personnel and you're going to have on one side of the formation, it's just a split out slot wide receiver, you're not putting any structural stress on the defense.
Right.
And they're going to play nickel, and you're going to try to go 5-on-5 plus a tight end to fit a 6.5-man box. And that's just such a hard way to run the ball. I will be looking for what does 1st and 10 look like for Cincinnati. And if you get out of 11, and that's their DNA. They did that all year last year too. But if you're going to get this thing going and you're going to be a little bit more balanced, you have to change something with how you are putting personnel out on the field.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like on Locked On NFL Kickoff Live, we are not so much buying what's going to happen with the Bengals, whether or not they're finally going to get in the win column this coming week. But we'll tell you what we will buy and why right after Jarvis tells us about Prize Picks.
Hey, guys. Jarvis Davis here for Prize Picks. What I need you to do, let you know that Prize Picks is the most fun I've had winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entry. If you think that Jamar Chase is going to get off and you're not trying to hear what we're talking about as far as that passing game and they need to sling the ball all over the yard, hit the over on Jamar Chase. Go ahead and put some money down. Put some money where your mouth is. And all you got to do, like you said, is test your skills, because this is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250. You can turn $20 into $300. You can turn $35 into $700. Whatever. Just go to prizepicks.com. Here's what I want you to do. How do I play, Jarvis? Calm down. I got you, man. Come on, I got you. It's your boy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Yes, you heard that correctly. All you got to do is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I'm telling y'all, Prize Picks, it is the daily fantasy sports made easy.
Well, you know what is not so easy at this point in the football season is to figure out who we actually believe in and we think, hey, that's a good team that's starting out of the gates playing good, or a team that maybe they're a head scratcher because we thought they were going to be good, but they're looking pretty bad. So it's kind of one of those where we've got to figure it out. It's hard to tell. The NFC South is a great example of hard to tell, because who thought we were going to be talking about 3 2-0 teams at this juncture? And then, of course, you got the NFC East with the same. So, Kyle, I mean, when you look at the NFC East and you see that the Cowboys and the Commanders and the Eagles are all 2-0, which one of those teams are 2 or maybe all 3 that you say, I think they're actually all really good?
So I think you could probably draw a line in the sand and say half of the 2-0 teams I think are pretty good. And then I think there's the other side of the line in the sand is teams that you look at and ask yourselves, okay, well, who have you played? And you look at Washington, and they eked out a win that they had to come back from behind, or needed a defensive touchdown to beat the Arizona Cardinals, who are widely considered the worst team in the league, and needed a stopped 2-point conversion with the defensive pass interference while also coming back down from 18 points in the first half to beat the Denver Broncos. It's like it's still enough of a small sample size where you look at the record and you say, wow, I didn't expect you to be here. And then you look at how they got there and you say, oh, okay, yeah, it makes a little bit more sense now. So I look at Tampa Bay. I think the teams that Tampa Bay has played do not have the personnel to really challenge the issues that Tampa Bay has with their offensive line. You think about Chicago last week, right? And they got a defensive touchdown because they got a pick 6 on a screen pass when Chicago was backed up inside their own 5. So I think Tampa Bay is one that stands out to me. Washington's another one that I'm not buying as 2-0 teams, but I sneakily like those Atlanta Falcons guys. They very much have, and it's fitting because Arthur Smith coming off the Mike Vrabel coaching tree, they are NFC Tennessee with what Tennessee was, where they said it's smash mouth football. We're going to run the ball. We're not going to try to be anything that we're not. We're not going to panic if we're down 2 scores. We're still going to run the football and play hard-nosed defense. And they did all that. And it got him a win against Green Bay last week because they gave the ball to Bijan Robinson more than Tyler Algier. And lo and behold, we got that sweet Instagram clip of Bijan from the overhead shot with the ball moving around, which is probably the coolest football shot I've ever seen in my life. I think I'm buying the Falcons as a team that maybe not going to win double-digit games and have home playoff games, but is absolutely going to be in the thick of this thing to the end as far as a race for that division title, because 9 might get it done when it's all said and done.
Interesting that you say that, because we all here in Atlanta say, hey, the only way they're going to probably get in the playoffs is to win the NFC South outright, and somehow they're going to probably need, but they won't actually need 10 wins to do it. So you're absolutely right about the double digits piece. And Kyle, they're getting potentially Jeff Okudah back. I think Jarvis would agree that in all likelihood, he's participated 3 days in a row in practice, looking like he's going to come back as well. But Jarvis, when you look at, and I'll swing up to Kyle's way, right? When you look at the AFC East, I mean, I think everybody would have been okay saying that the Dolphins were going to be 2-0, but I think you probably thought that the Bills would have been 2-0 as well. So maybe a situation where you're looking and saying, oh, okay, wow, those teams are good, but are they, it's almost like, are the Dolphins as good as 2-0 early sample size, and are the Bills as bad as 1-1, if you will? Or what are some of the teams that you're looking out there and saying, really good, really bad, or maybe worse than we actually think they are?
I'm gonna start with Kyle's team. They are 2-0. Like, if as long as Tua stays healthy, I am buying the Dolphins all the way. When you're talking about what they're able to do with their offense with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and the burners that they are, and being able, and Mike McDaniel, the mad scientist, calling plays down there, coming off that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. Like, I won't put him on Kyle Shanahan's play calling capabilities, but he's dang close. He's doggone close, Kyle. Yeah, so I'm buying them. I'm buying the Miami Dolphins all the way, and I'm gonna push back on the Washington Commanders. Hear me out, Kyle. They finally have a guy who knows what he's doing when it comes to coaching quarterbacks, cultivating quarterbacks. Eric Bieniemy is finally going to get his just due this year, as far as from a play caller standpoint, because a lot of people don't want to give him the credit because Andy Reid, he has the big old sheet, and Big Red out there just calling plays and doing his thing, and I kind of get that, but I think he went to Washington Commanders specifically to prove that, hey, I know what I'm doing when he calls plays, and I feel like he's putting Sam Howell in a good position to be able to do that. And also, to go along with that, we talk about the surrounding talent. We talk about the San Francisco 49ers and how Brock Purdy has all that talent on offense, and they have a bevy of talent on the defensive side of the football as well. Commanders got that too, specifically up front. Montez Sweat and Deron Payne. Deron Payne is out here just mauling folks. He's just having just an amazing season. It's funny how cats continue to play once they get that fat check, and he is just out there like, yes, I am worth every penny. So yeah, I think that when you have a team that has been so inept at that offensive position, on the offensive side of the football, and you have a defensive-minded head coach, I think that Eric Bieniemy is going to get his shine on this year, and I think you're starting to see the benefit of that early on in the season.
I think Eric's biggest test, and I agree with you, I think he's done an awesome job from a scheme perspective, is the personnel up front on the offensive line. Where Andrew Wiley was kind of the big acquisition to play right tackle for them. And you look at some of the personnel, whether it's Charles Leno at tackle, or they had the upheaval at guard, and it's Cosme and Sadiq Charles and Nick Gates at center. We're going to find out in the next 2 weeks, because they play the Bills and then they play the Philadelphia Eagles. Agreed. So That for me is if Washington can pass the test and block up front the next 2 weeks and allow the scheme and the plays to develop for Sam Howell to execute it, then I think even if they lose both games, I could come back in 2 weeks and say, hey, they blocked them up better up front than I thought they would. They were able to put points on the board. I think I'm buying this team long term. But I just look at that. It's that age-old question of like, can you coach around the limitation on the offensive line, which is how I perceive them right now based off of what we have off the sample size? Because you look at Arizona and you look at Denver and you don't really see the disruptors that potentially could derail a game plan.
Indeed. So I think we all agree on what we think about those 2-0 teams, but let's switch it up to 0-2 teams. The Los Angeles Chargers, 0-2. They're traveling to face another 0-2 team in the Minnesota Vikings. The Chargers are the 1.5-point underdogs in that one. So here's David Drogmeyer to sell you why the Chargers will cover that spread.
The Chargers have had a really tough start to their 2023 season, obviously starting 0-2. But they are a desperate football team, and they are going to get back into the win column this Sunday, and they will cover the FanDuel spread of 1.5. And here is how they are going to do it. The Minnesota Vikings, they're a one-dimensional offense. They do not run the football. So that means you got to allocate all your resources to stopping the pass and stopping that very lethal threat of Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is on an absolute tear. And so the Chargers need to make sure they know where he is at all times. I believe they will allocate those resources to stop him. I believe they will have a safety hanging over the top. I want the Chargers to double team him every single chance that they get. Remove Justin Jefferson from the game plan. Force anyone else on that Minnesota offense to beat you. And then as far as the Chargers on offense, the game plan, it's very simple. It's run the ball. The Philadelphia Eagles just ran all over the Minnesota Vikings to the tune of 259 rushing yards on 48 carries. They were very dedicated to running the ball, but they also were able to set up some shot plays and hit the Minnesota Vikings over the top for a couple of big, deep plays. The Chargers need that. They need more explosive plays. I think the running game is going to be able to allow them to draw the defense in and allow the Chargers with Justin Herbert and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen to hit the Vikings over the top and dial up some of those deep shots. I think that's very important. And I do believe that's going to happen in this game. And those are going to be the reasons why I believe the Chargers are going to cover the spread and they are going to beat the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday to improve to 1-2 on the season. But for more on this game and for more on the Chargers, please check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, your team every day.
You guys buying the Chargers in this one?
I am.
Yes.
You got me scared, man.
Where did it go from? Oh no. Here's the thing, man. Like I really feel like this is a must-win game. Now, I'm not trying to be dramatic and everything.
For both Jarvis or
I think
the
it's a must-win for the Chargers for sure.
Okay.
Because Brandon Staley has to be on the hot seat because you talk about the weapons. Justin Herbert, everybody can probably potentially agree that it's a generational quarterback, right? And then you have the weapons on the outside with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And, they're able to put up points, but Brandon Staley is a defensive-minded head coach, and that defense just hasn't been anything worth speaking of. And I really see this game turning into a shootout because we all know when the Minnesota Vikings just traded for Cam Akers, and now they try to see the value of a running back or having a capable running back. Now that's okay. Now you're trying to do that. Now you understand. And by letting Dalvin Cook and cutting down Cook. So I think that all of those things are factors that I really feel like when you're in a situation where you have all this talent and everybody always says, hey, if I'm starting a team today, that position is going to be QB. And the Chargers have a quarterback. They have a guy that is more than capable than winning some games for them, but they just haven't been able to figure it out. It's just been so weird with this team. And I think Brandon Staley is going to ultimately fall on the sword for it.
And Casey, I thought that was interesting as well, where we're talking about the Chargers, right? And we're talking about the fact that we all agree we think that's the team that is in a must-win situation. We think that's the team that's going to get it done. But David didn't really talk a lot about Justin Herbert as being the catalyst for the Chargers getting it done. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, especially because I look over at the other side of the ball with Minnesota and what they have in the secondary. They don't have a lot of talent there. And Brian
Right.
Flores likes to play a lot of high pressure. And you
Mhm.
saw that against Philadelphia, where they're mugging linebackers up in gaps. They got 6 guys on the line of scrimmage. And then you're trying to play one-on-one down the field with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. And you just don't have the guys in the secondary to do that at a very high level. So while it disrupted Philadelphia at first, Philadelphia eventually said, okay, we're going to come out in 12 and we're going to run the ball down your throat. And they didn't change what they were doing defensively. So if I'm the Chargers coming into this game, yes, I want to be balanced because I don't want Brian Flores to be able to tee off on me with their pressure schemes. But I am looking to really take advantage of the matchups of who's covering Mike Williams. And if you double Mike Williams, I got Keenan Allen. Okay.
Yes.
And then if you're doubling both those guys, then I'm going to run the ball. And I'll run it right down your throat like Philadelphia did because they've got the offensive line to do it, even with if Austin Eckler doesn't play. I know he's dealing with an ankle injury.
Right.
I think there's enough talent disparity on the outside for the Chargers when they have the ball that there's no way Minnesota should be right with consistency for 60 minutes.
Now, I think there's another game that we can talk about that, again, we'll probably all agree on who's going to win, but the spread is interesting. The Chicago Bears are 13.5-point underdogs to the Kansas City Chiefs heading to Arrowhead this weekend. And here's Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears to sell you why the Bears will cover the 2-touchdown spread.
The Chicago Bears will cover the spread against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they know what the Buccaneers are going to do to try and stop them. And there's a lot of pressure on this Bears team to bounce back after a very disappointing week 1. We all know that Todd Bowles is going to blitz Justin Fields. We've seen the Buccaneers do it in previous matchups with the Bears, and we saw them do it a bunch in week 1. It's the way to try and get in Justin Fields' head. There's no mystery here. So then they can know what to do to try and counteract that. They can get rid of the ball more quickly. They can try and roll the pocket away from the blitz. They can leave extra players in to pass protect and can help get this offense back on track, knowing what the defense is going to try and do to get after them. On the other side of the ball, they know they want to go deep with Mike Evans. They know Chris Godwin's going to work underneath over the middle, try and use his route running ability to their advantage. It becomes an easier time to try and stop them, force them to beat you with some of their lesser weapons on offense. And the plan is there for the Bears to put together, at the very least, a game plan to cover the spread, if not try and get in the victory column this week. There's certainly a lot of pressure on this team to play better after disappointment across the board last week. It felt like they came out not exactly unprepared, but just not executing at a high level. A lot of self-inflicted wounds, mistakes where they felt like they beat themselves just as much as the Packers beat them. That can be a little bit easier to clean up than just going out there and feel like, we're no good. Well, no, it's a little bit more complicated than that. They can be better than what they showed last week in week 1. And the Buccaneers are certainly an opportunity for this team to try and get their season on track. It doesn't mean they're going to fix everything and look like some kind of offensive juggernaut and big-time playoff contender, but they've got a great opportunity to cover the spread against a Buccaneers team that may be a little overconfident after beating the Vikings in week 1.
Well, we know Lauren really just wanted to replay. You know how we want to run things back and maybe it'll be different if we run it back? It ain't going to be different, Lauren. It was the Bucs last week and it'll be the Chiefs this week. And yeah, unfortunately, I think, Casey, it's 13.5 points, but Chiefs will cover that. The spread, the Bears will cover the spread.
I'm not sure that the Bears will cover the spread. I'm going to be
You don't
honest.
think so? Okay.
There is not a worse unit for unit mismatch than Kansas City with a top 5 offensive line against Chicago's defensive front. Chicago they have 189 rushing yards through 2 games with Justin Fields at quarterback. We got the entire appeal of Justin Fields. And he said this week, I'm going to just go back to playing ball, right? And try not to internalize so much of what's being directed at me. And there was a whole circus that was made for 3 hours over that comment before he talked to the media again after practice. At the end of the day, what Justin Fields and what the Bears did well last year for Justin Fields was they got really exotic quarterback run schemes. And they said, look, we got a powerful runner, 240-pound quarterback that runs a 4.3. We can run the ball, option-oriented run game, put defense in stress, and really try to out-gap you in the run game because we have an extra hat because we're running the ball with the quarterback. when you don't do that and you try to do what Chicago has been doing this year, you're taking away the best part of what makes Justin Fields Justin Fields. So unless you're going to go back to that, which I have no confidence that they will,
Yeah.
and then I look over at the other side of the ball, I don't see any reason how you stand up against Kansas City with their offensive line. So that, for me, I look at both sides of the ball, and I think Kansas City's got a good advantage. And 13.5, I'd probably take Kansas City cover. I would.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree, because here's the thing, man. It is the Bears are a dumpster fire right now. You got the defensive coordinator may or may not have had his home raided by the FBI, resigning, and like you said, like Kyle mentioned, talking about the Justin Fields and getting back to myself, and it's too many players, it's too many voices in my head, and I just need to get back to being me. And it's just this dude just going through it mentally, like just the face of your organization. Paul, just bless his heart, just bless Justin Fields' heart right now. I think it's just too much going on in order for to get this out. Because let's take it back to last year. Like, we were having this same conversation, Kyle, last year about using this dude's talent. Yeah, he could throw the rock. No, don't get me wrong, but one of his best assets, if it's not his best asset, is running that bad boy and using that, because that is a tool that you can use to take advantage of the defense if your passing game isn't up to par. And he didn't have any weapons last year. They traded a second round pick for Chase Claypool, who has just been awful since he stepped into Chicago. So I think right now it is just we're having the same conversation about Luke Getsy trying to figure this thing out. It took him 7 games to do it last year, and they finally was able. You saw some of that greatness that they were able to take advantage of by using his legs to be able to run the football. And you talking about 189 yards 2 games in? That is absolutely ridiculous. And you got a running back in Roschon Johnson that you need to use more as well. So it is so. If they had that game plan right there by running the football, I feel like the Bears could cover. They could cover, but they're not going to do that, because that's why I feel like the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to easily cover this 13.5 point spread.
Yeah. And I have to agree and kind of check myself, because I was thinking, wait a minute, did I say Bears? Nah, I meant Chiefs. So let me just be clear. I think that the Chiefs are going to be just fine covering that spread. It'll be interesting to see, though, how this goes down, because, I think even more so than covering the spread, it's what's going on internally with the Bears, and whether or not how they're going to make it through this entire season is a bigger deal for them. Now, you look at the Denver Broncos, another 0-2 team, and not so much internal issues. It's almost like they just can't get it done and close out at the end of the games. They're headed to South Florida, so they're going to have a serious test with Kyle's team, the Miami Dolphins. The Broncos are 6.5-point underdogs. Cody Rourke of Locked On Broncos, however, is here to tell us why the Broncos will cover that spread.
This is Cody Rourke of Locked On Broncos, and the Denver Broncos head into Week 3 Sunday showdown in South Beach against the Miami Dolphins as 6.5-point underdogs, according to our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. So why do I think that the Broncos will cover the spread here against the Dolphins? Well, let's take a look at maybe some circumstances here through the first 2 weeks of action. When you look at where Denver's offense is at with Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, they're 3rd in the NFL in plays per drive and yards per drive. They're 1st in the NFL in points per drive. Now, granted, sitting at 0-2, something doesn't add up here. And we saw the Broncos collapse in Week 2 against the Washington Commanders. Denver can put up points. The offense is better, though they went through a little bit of a stalwart last week against the Commanders from the second quarter until a little bit late in that fourth quarter, where they came back and had the Hail Mary there. Denver has the pieces and they have the tools, but it's about establishing balance on the offensive side of the ball here. And I think the number one thing that we've seen, Denver's offense going against the Miami Dolphins defense, now coached by Vic Fangio, former head coach of the Denver Broncos, and former Broncos outside linebacker Bradley Chubb playing there, is they love to pressure and they love to force offenses to throw the ball short. They rally and tackle. Denver capitalized on downfield plays last week against the Commanders, and then they went away from it entirely. You have to dictate the pace here. And I think if the Broncos offense can continue to maintain the efficiency that they've had on the offensive side of the ball, they will cover the 6.5-point spread here this week against the Dolphins. I think the bigger question in the wild card is, can Denver's defense, which is right now one of the bottom-ranked units in the NFL, can they find a way to mitigate the big explosive plays from Tua Tagovailoa and Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert in this game? That's the question here. But if Denver can do things offensively in the way that I think they can, they will cover the 6.5-point spread.
Well, Kyle, this is right down your alley, up and down your alley in South Florida. So how's it going to go down in South Beach this weekend?
I am very encouraged by the way that practice has gone for the Dolphins this week with Teron Armstead, who didn't play in the first 2 games as a high-priced offensive tackle. I know y'all in Atlanta know him really well from his time in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
So Teron, Mike McDaniel said today, optimistic for him in week 3. Jalen Phillips did not play on Sunday Night Football with back spasms that he suffered on Friday's practice. He's good to go. He's going to play. Jalen Waddle practiced today in red non-contact. He's in concussion protocol, but he practiced today, and he was a part of the stretch. So it would seem to be he's in phase 4 of concussion protocol. There's a chance that he clears and is able to play in this game as well. You look on the other side, Justin Simmons didn't practice the first 2 days. He got shook up with a hip injury. I just think the personnel trends plus Denver, high altitude coming to 95-degree heat index, 1 o'clock p.m. kickoff. Miami's wearing their whites. There's a whole lot of layers here that you piece it all together with that defense that Cody talked about with the Broncos. I agree the Broncos have the capability. They had three explosive 50-plus yard plays in the game against Washington. They had a 60-yard touchdown pass to Marvin Mims. That was a quarters beater. They hit a shot down the sideline that was against cover 1 where he beat press coverage on the outside and ran by him down the sideline. And then they had the Hail Mary at the end of the game. The Dolphins have allowed 3 completions of 15 yards or further down the field through their first 2 games, and they played the Chargers. So if Vic decides you're not getting over the top of us, you ain't getting over the top, period. So I think that's the biggest hurdle is the Broncos, who have been penalized 19 times through the first 2 games that they played. They got to play discipline to be able to string drives together with consistency, and I don't have the confidence that they'll do it. So I would fade the Broncos to cover 6.5.
And it's interesting you said that, Casey, because literally as you're talking about it, that was my first thought. Like that team under Sean Payton, no doubt, has been a very undisciplined Broncos team. Meanwhile, the Dolphins are showing themselves to be quite disciplined, and they're getting some of their weapons back, Jarvis. So that should make all the difference in terms of this game and who covers the spread.
Yeah, I think that when you look at what Miami, the Dolphins are able to do, like, because when you're building the defense out, like the edge rushes are so important, right? Like when it comes to in the run game, and also when it comes to rushing the passer, when it's time to get home. And when you got guys like Bradley Chubb, a guy like Jalen Phillips coming back, and I absolutely love that cat coming out. I wanted to see him in black and red, but we don't care about doggone pass rushers down here. Like we like pretty weapons. So, but yeah, that's another whole conversation, Kyle. Sorry, I'm getting in my feels here. But when you look at what those guys are able to do and to be able to take advantage of that Broncos offensive line, I really feel like that's what's going to be the difference in the game, because Russ is cooked, y'all. Can we go ahead and stop acting like that's not the case? Russ is cooked. He's cooked. That's one of the reasons why this hasn't all panned out for Sean Payton. And Sean Payton, yeah, let me stick. We'll get to Sean, but I think that overall, Cody had me all the way up till he said, all they got to do is just be able to stop Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddell. What? All you got to do?
All you have to do, right?
One thing that I learned in life, T and Cal, if somebody starts to send off a sentence by saying all you have to do, I normally turn my ears off, because more than likely it's probably going to be come hell high water. You're gonna have to be able to say, hey, you know what? I don't know about that. It's gonna be a pretty difficult task, and I think that's gonna be another reason why I feel like the Broncos will not cover that spread.
Yeah, it'll be that'll be an interesting game. That's an intriguing matchup. I can't wait to see what happens. Now, I know you guys can't wait for round 2 from this NFL Kickoff Live crew, but if you're hungry, you probably want to hear first about DoorDash.
Let me ask y'all something. Jarvis Davis here for DoorDash. Have y'all just been sitting at the house and saying, you know what? I'm hungry, but I don't feel like driving. I don't want to go anywhere. Guess what? We at DoorDash, we got you covered. All you got to do, they're going to deliver your favorite restaurants, and you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers as well. Come on, y'all. Thousands of grocery stores to choose from. You'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. We even talking about politics, getting this bad boy going with them. It's easy substitutions right in the app and best-in-class customer support. DoorDash delivers groceries exactly how you want them. Exactly what you want right there to your door. So all you have to do, guys, if you just you like, Jarvis, you got me. What do I need to do? All right, here you go. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off, up to $20. No minimum subtotal and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download DoorDash in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONNFL. So don't forget, Locked On NFL for 50% off your first order with DoorDash.
Boy, I could use some DoorDash right now, but I won't because we got to start off our number two of NFL Kickoff Live, because it's where you guys are going to get the best football talk every single Friday. We'll talk and take you around the league. We'll talk and take you to every team. We'll talk and take you to every game, any breaking news that seems to come up every Friday for us. So if it comes through, we're going to bring that to you. So the Baltimore Ravens, of course, they ruled out Odell Beckham Jr. We're looking for some others that are kind of teetering like a Cordero Patterson for the Falcons now. Just a few minutes ago, right here on Locked On, that's the kind of thing you're going to hear from us. Moments ago, we heard this. Then you'll hear from us as well. So I'm Tanitra Batiste. Still got my guys, Kyle Krafts and Jarvis Davis, right here to bring you all the tea. Now, I'm going to give you guys a couple of team names, and I know that nobody said these were the teams that were going to be 2-0 heading into week 3. At least not all these teams, right? Cowboys, Ravens, Dolphins, Eagles, Commanders, Falcons, Bucs, and Saints. Now, we talked a little bit about some of these teams before, but when you bring that group together as the teams that have 2-0 records, there are a couple of those teams that do not belong in the conversation. Kind of like one of these things is doing its own thing back in the Sesame Street days. Which teams actually don't belong in the conversation of good teams who are 2-0?
Let's start in the NFC South. How about the New Orleans Saints?
Absolutely. Oh my! Shots fired at Ross Jackson.
They do not deserve to be in this conversation because guess what? Derek Carr is a loser. 65-79 as a starter in the NFL. He's a okay quarterback, and he came with all this hoopla saying, "Oh, Derek Carr is gonna come save the day." No, yeah, like that game against the Carolina Panthers last week, absolute snooze fest. It took them so long to get that offense going. And we know what the Falcons did to the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers probably going to have the number 1 overall pick. And it's probably, it's going to Chicago. So, yeah, there you go. That's what the Carolina Panthers are. They are the worst team in the NFC South. And you sat there for a good 2.5 quarters and said, you know what? Hey, we're trying to figure this bad boy out. And guess what? Who's the head coach? Dennis Allen. Don't trust him. I don't trust him. Yes, I love Cameron Jordan. One of my secret favorite players ever to play. The dude is an excellent pass rusher. He's making a fair case to get into the Hall of Fame, but he's up there in age, and that defense matches that, right? Like that defense is getting up there. DeMario Davis doesn't have that many years left, so I'm not trusting the New Orleans Saints right now. That is a team that I feel like does not belong in that conversation as one of the better teams in the NFL.
Well, Kyle, Jarvis chose violence on the Saints. Who are you going to choose violence towards that does not belong in that conversation?
Move over, JD. I'm getting in the car with you. Let's talk about the Saints here for a second. I got some numbers for you. No, I do think this team in the grand scheme playing in this division with this defense is probably top 5 defense in football. Okay. So I think they will, kind of like Atlanta, they're going to be in the conversation, but do you trust them to run away with it? Here's some numbers for you. 36 points scored against Tennessee and Carolina defenses. That is 25th in scoring offense through the first 2 weeks. They have one passing touchdown through the first 2 weeks. That's 29th in the NFL. They average 3.4 yards per rush. I know they got some running backs that are banged up, but the offensive production has not been there. That 3.4 is 24th in the NFL. And then you get into the red zone offense. They're 29th in touchdown percentage, getting into the red zone, 3 of 8. Small sample size, but like the switch has to flip. And until it does, I look at New Orleans and it's like your margin for error is going to be pretty small in any given week. And as Derek Carr showed you the last couple years, he's not immune to that game where he makes a couple mistakes and they snowball and they compound and it loses you a game that you shouldn't. So I take all that and then I look and say, okay, you're at Green Bay this week. Then you're home against the Bucs. They got a tough defense. And then you're at New England. And then you have 2 more road games in the next 3 weeks after that. You're going to spend a lot of time in the next month and a half on the road away from New Orleans. And the offense has to click. So that for me is where I'm watching New Orleans. And I'll be asking myself, how much am I ready to buy the team? Because right now I think there are some red flags and there's some red tape around how they've gotten to 2-0 that it can't be like that all year.
Now we're talking about some defenses that are aging a little bit, right? And yeah, there's some young studs for the Bucs defense, but I do think they're kind of a defense that's up and down and aging as well. And I think for me, that might be the team. I kind of agree with you guys. Like the Saints surprised me a little bit as well, but I kind of think the Bucs surprised me as 2-0 too, because this is a team that many are saying they were going to be in a dogfight with the Arizona Cardinals for the number 1 pick for next year. Now, granted, not surprisingly, the guy who covers the Saints.
Yes.
Okay. But for the Vikings, they held the Vikings to 17 points. That was a little shocking because we know that can be a high-powered offense. Now, they held the Bears to 17 as well. Not so much shocking. Probably more shocking that the Bears actually scored 17 points, if we're real about it. But then they start to really get into the test because they got the Eagles. So we're going to really see what they're made of when they take on the Eagles. It'll be an interesting, and I'm going to use the term loosely, interesting with the Saints. And then they've got something to face with the Lions as well. So we're about to find out just how legit that 2-0 is. That is maybe the team where I feel like they don't quite belong in this conversation as well. Now, in 3, 2, 1, we're actually going to talk about the top 3. We're going to give you guys a little bit of insight into who are those players for Kyle, for Jarvis, and why. But first, Jarvis has to tell you guys, about Game Time.
It's game time, folks. I'm telling you. Like when you're sitting around trying to figure out whether or not you want to go to the game and you're trying to plan all that stuff, man, scrap all that. Don't do it. I promise you. Planning is for suckers. I need you to wait till the last minute and go to the Game Time app and get this doggone tickets for the low. I promise you're going to get a great deal. And you know what? They have deals, tickets right up to the day of the event. So all you gotta do is just take your time, take it easy, and just wait and go grab those tickets. They have exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and much, much more. If you want to go on date night with your spouse, you can do that as well. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. How about that for a guarantee? So yeah, wait till the last minute and go to gametime.com/NFL and download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Yes, that's $20 off your first purchase if you use the code LOCKEDONNFL. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Jarvis, people sleep on that low-key but effective way of purchasing tickets. I am a believer in, you wait until the last minute and you'd be amazed at what it is that you can get. So yeah, definitely check out Game Time. Now, every week we kind of talk about these 3 players that we want to watch, right? We're intrigued by whether or not they're going to be the difference maker for that particular team in that particular game. And we happen to be going into week 3. So let's talk a little bit about players that you want to watch and why. Jarvis, give us your first player, and then Kyle, come back and give us who your player is as well. And then I might give you guys a sneak peek into who I'll be watching this week as well.
You know what? The first guy that comes to mind, it has to be Desmond Ridder, because, like I said, he's been shaky to start games off, like, to be quite honest, and for him to be able to come through and make plays when he's called upon to, because, like you said, Arthur Smith is the type of coach that's not going to put his quarterback in bad situations. He's going to make sure of that from a play calling standpoint. And he had against the Green Bay Packers, he had a couple dropped interceptions that probably could have turned into pick sixes. So I think this week against the Detroit Lions, going up against an offense that can put some points on the board, Jared Goff, they're going to push that ball down the field when you talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown and having a guy like an explosive player out of the backfield and Jameer Gibbs. Those are the type of guys they're going to be able to put the points on the board. And I think that if you get to a point, if your defense gets caught off guard and you get into a shootout, can you make plays? Can you get your team in position to be able to have more points than the opposing team once that clock strikes zero?
How about you, Kyle? Who's your guy to watch?
I'm going to give you 5 guys, and it's the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line. Okay.
You're talking my language. Okay, language.
So Pittsburgh's 1-1. You had the fourth quarter come from behind victory in which you had -7 yards of offense and 9 first downs in the game in the fourth quarter to come back in week 2 against the Browns. This Pittsburgh team is averaging 3.1 yards per carry. They have 96 team rushing yards through 2 weeks. Kenny Pickett is averaging 4.8 net yards per attempt. A good number is 7. So we're like barely halfway there. They have been horrible. They offensively, they got 2 defensive touchdowns last week to get to 26. They've scored 19 points in 2 games offensively against the Browns and the 49ers. You got the Raiders this week. Okay. And the Raiders are averaging about 5 yards per carry given up on the ground. Can you please, and I know Matt Canada is a problem. I hear Steelers fans. I know the talking points there. It's really ugly because it looks like the same thing the 5th time you line up to run it as it does the first time you run it every single week. So I know that the infrastructure of the coaching is not great offensively for Kenny Pickett and company.
Right.
But all of that to be said, you guys got to figure this out. You guys have to get something going. I don't care if it's George Pickens. Maybe you should try to throw it to Pat Freiermuth, who has 2 catches for 5 yards in the first 2 weeks, is one of the better tight ends in the game. You got to give it to your first-round running back, Najee Harris, who for the first time in his career is averaging over 4 yards per carry because he's ripped off a couple 15, 20-yard runs. Like, we got to get something going here. And it starts up front for Pittsburgh. I know the play calling's not great, guys. But you guys got to figure it out because they invested a lot. They spent a first-round pick on Broderick Jones, who's not necessarily playing. They spent money to bring in a new starting guard. The entire left side of the line is overhauled and revamped. It's got to be better. And when you're playing Las Vegas, Max Crosby can single-handedly take a game that you have the potential to comfortably win, and he can ruin it. So you guys better not fart around with Max Crosby, and you better get something going offensively.
Yeah, I mean, I really am only going to throw some things in there to co-sign because the player I was going to watch was Kenny Pickett. A 19.9 QBR rating. I mean, you might as well just not have a rating if that's going to be your rating. 454 yards through 2 games is still not Kenny Pickett-like with 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. But going back to what we said before, we saw him in the preseason. Mike Tomlin chose to play his starters for a pretty good amount of time when they took on the Falcons, right? And so you're looking at Kenny Pickens and he's, he's firing on all cylinders. Now, to be fair, he was firing on all cylinders with Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. It does make a difference that you don't have him. However, I would agree with you, Kyle, that you do have Pat Freiermuth. And the Steelers are one team, one franchise that has been known to be able to take advantage of a good tight end, whether it's that tight end on the receiving end. Tight ends are always expected to be excellent blockers. They're almost like that 6'0" lineman for the Steelers. So, yeah, I definitely need to see it. But I'll be honest, when I go with, I'm going to use it loosely. I know we said 3 players to watch, but since you went for 5 players, I'm going to go with a non-player and say, God darn it, I am watching Matt Canada because I am absolutely sick of the way that he calls games. So I do think that while, I need to see better from Kenny, I need to see better from the O-line, I need to see better from Matt Canada as well. How about you, Jarvis? Are there any other players that you want to go with? Because I'm just, like I said, I went with my coach and I went with my players, and I probably would say just to kind of round out my three, if you will, going back to the Falcons, I am very interested. Jerry Gray, who's the assistant head coach on defense for the Falcons, talked about the fact that he doesn't necessarily want Jeff Okudah to play with too much emotion. And Jeff Okudah said, hey, I'm over it. I've moved on. I'm not there. But low key, he has to have a little something that kind of makes him a little motivated when he gets back to the Motor City. So I'm interested to see. He's my guy that I'm going to be watching to see if Okudah can show us Okudah things in his first game with the Falcons in the regular season.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting game to watch for sure, because it's a lot of I feel like there is, when you think about the teams that the Falcons have played, defensively, like from a wide receiver group standpoint, Carolina Panthers and the Green Bay Packers sans Christian Watson. So that's what we talk about. They have gone up against. So I think this is going to be the first true test, because I feel like AJ Terrell is going to have a task at hand, because Amon-Ra St. Brown is the type of guy, he's going to get his regardless of what you try to do or scheme, or like the dude just going to end up with 6 or 7 catches, 75, 80 yards, depending on whether you give up those explosive plays or not. So I think that, AJ Terrell is a guy, along with Jeff Okudah, and it looked like he's in line to play. Yes. This secondary is going to be tested, and I'm very interested to see how they respond, because like this is going to be that first real test for the 2023 season.
Indeed. Kyle Krabs and Jarvis Davis. The New Orleans Saints fan base does not like the fact that you chose violence against their team in our last segment.
I was happy.
Yeah.
Shocking.
They got a problem. They got a problem with that. You see, Jerry G says Saints run this. Their team is garbage. Talking about the other teams, I think they're talking about. But yeah, they have a problem. Tiffany Tyson says, don't matter if they feel we belong. We are here. So shots fired back from Saints Nation. Herschel, Saints for life. What are they going to say when we're 4-0? What say KC and JD?
Well, I'd like to establish, I did say the top 5 defense in football.
You did give him credit for that.
I think that's very important. And it would be low-hanging fruit. In the earlier segment, I went in on the Commanders. I didn't want to just bludgeon Washington all over again. I went hard at Washington as a fraudulent team. So I just am saying, I agree, and as it was about red tape and big-time concerns. Derek Carr's getting sacked on 10% of his dropbacks this year. Trevor Penning hasn't looked great. Right? So you can only play the games on your schedule. You're 2-0. But the sustainability of it is where, when I look at New Orleans, that's what I am worried about. I think they have a realistic chance because of the defense to be in this conversation. But I look at the problems that they've had offensively in 1-point win over Tennessee and against Carolina. And you ask yourself, okay, what happens when you get in more robust matchups? Yeah, you have to be able to put more points on the board. You can't take so many negative plays. So that's where I'm at with New Orleans.
Yeah. Now, where they may end up being 4-0, and where they may end up, and when I say running the table, meaning being right there with the Falcons, contesting for the division title, is the fact that both of those teams have the easiest strength of schedule for this season. So when I look at them saying 4-0, meaning Saints Nation, I'm like, well, it's possible, because you could certainly see them beating the Packers, and you can see them beating the Bucs. But Jarvis, they fired some serious shots. So you want to fire back?
Like the educational system that I'm hearing right now, with the whole 28-3 jokes, like, you ain't got anything else. Like, come on, like. I understand, like, you can bring that up at any point, but like, why would you even bring that up? Like, this is where we are. We're in the now. Huh?
Right. Jarvis was
I've never heard that before. What does that mean? 28-3.
Like, the score of the Super Bowl before Tom Brady.
No, I know. I'm helping
you. He gets
out.
Triggered, Kyle.
Right.
He gets triggered.
Like,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, he'll be rocking back and forth in a little while.
Saints fans are so distraught with the smell of that city and that town, that they can't even smell the fact that Dennis Allen is a fraud. He's an absolute fraud as a head coach. Like, why do you all trust him? Why do you put your trust and your faith in Dennis Allen? Defense coordinator? Absolutely. No doubt about it. I hire him as a defensive coordinator if I was running my own team, but I dang on sure I'm not going to hire him as my head coach, and I just don't trust him. Like I said, the Derek Carr stuff, I didn't buy it when they brought him in. I was just like, okay, what is that going to do? Like, you're going to be average, still going to be an average football team. So I think that right now where the Saints are, given like the sustainability of, like, we've seen these games. I watched the game last week against the Carolina Panthers. That can't last. If Derek Carr can't consistently go out there and be the quarterback that he's paid to be, you're going to be exceptionally average going forward. Thank you.
And Dennis, thank you for this PSA. So in Dennis,
I'm Jarvis Davis, and I approve this message.
You approve the message. That from our guy who definitely gives us all the great messages for our sponsors. Now, there are actually a couple of games that I'm interested in checking out this weekend. And you already know one of them, of course, is going to be the Steelers game, because I really want to see if they can find a way to take advantage of the Raiders and kind of finally get it together. But the Washington Commanders game could be an intriguing one as well, because as we mentioned, a little bit of a surprise that they're 2-0. So this week they get their chance to prove whether or not it's legit against a Buffalo Bills team that is surprisingly not 2-0. How did the Commanders prove they belong in this conversation? Well, David Harrison of Locked On Commanders and Joe Marino of Locked On Bills, they're going to look at how they think this must-see game is going to flesh out.
And for the Washington Commanders side of things, we're going back to that resiliency, right? If you're a resilient person, that means you like to hang in when times get tough. Well, if you're going to be a resilient team, that means you got to hang in and not allow one play drives to end up with 60-yard touchdown passes. And that's what the Washington Commanders have to do against this Buffalo Bills team, is limit the explosives. For the offense, that obviously means you can't let Stephon Diggs get big chunk yards. You can't let, Dawson Knox, any of these guys, Josh Allen, break off a 20-yard run. You can't let any of those things happen. In the first half against the Denver Broncos, they allowed 5 explosive offensive plays for the Broncos offense, if I remember correctly. In the second half, outside the Hail Mary, which was ugly by itself, they only allowed 1, and that, again, was huge in that comeback effort. On the offensive side of things, right, what are explosive defensive plays? Big sacks, strip sacks, interceptions. You cannot turn the ball over. You cannot let the Buffalo Bills defense feel comfortable in your house. You got to keep them on their toes as best that you can. And if you do those things, you hang in this fight. Again, the spread is what the spread is. But if you do all those things, then at the end of the day, in the fourth quarter, you should have an opportunity to come up with a big upset win. And, look, as measuring stick games go early on in the season, this is one of those matchups, Joe. I kind of wish they were both in the same conference, because you would love to maybe see these two meet up again. If both make the playoffs, the Bills should, the Commanders might. You'd love to see these two in the postseason again, see what the differences are from week 3 to week 19, 20, whatever it is, at the time they would face off. Obviously, that's not going to happen unless we see each other mid-February. But for week 3 in September, 6.5-point favorites for the Buffalo Bills. Joe, I don't know if you have a specific score yet, but do you have them covering the spread? Or do you have them just winning the game?
Well, you didn't even give me an option where the Bills would lose the game. I think you're assuming that I'm going to pick the Bills to win it. You're correct about that. I do think that the Bills go into Washington and win this game. I think they've done a good job throughout the years of kind of their glow up as a top team and not looking ahead, right? They're very much week to week. They focus on their opponent. They respect their opponent. Josh Allen, I don't know if I believe him, but when he was doing Kyle Brandt's basement last year, he was always like, I don't know who we play next. Like, okay, buddy, you probably do, but they certainly do embrace that. And I think that they're not going to overlook Washington. Obviously, there's the relationship between Sean McDermott and Ron Rivera that, of course, is something, storyline in this game. But it's going to be an interesting football game. You mentioned some of the explosive plays they gave up in the first half against Denver. The Bills didn't necessarily have the explosive plays against the Raiders. Only one pass that was targeted more than 20 yards down the field. They were able to kind of stay patient and embrace that style of football. Will they do that against Washington? Will Josh Allen go out there and want to put the ball down the field? It's going to be an interesting opportunity to see what this football team looks like against Washington, because I think it presents just a really different matchup on both sides of the football than what we've seen in the first couple weeks of the season. But I do think the Bills go into Washington, get a win. I have it at 27-17. I think they cover. But look, I'm not dismissing Washington. I think there's a path for them to win. I think they have the pass rush. If they can take away the football and really kind of just limit some of those big plays, win in the red zone, there's obviously a path for any team to win in the NFL. I'm not taking the Commanders lightly, but I do think the Bills take care of their business.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be alone on that. I know a lot of Commanders fans are anticipating what's going to happen. They're excited to see what happens in the future, but they do know that this game is going to be a very tough one for this organization to win right here, especially week 3. And I do think the Washington Commanders, like I said just a minute ago, week 3 Washington Commanders versus say week 13 Commanders are going to be two different teams, and hopefully health is on their side, and that helps them continue to develop. This is a team on the rise, I believe, but I don't think they're ready for a matchup like this one just yet, going up against the Buffalo Bills. And I do think that the Bills win this thing, but I'm going to go 27-21. So if you want to take the Commanders in the points of FanDuel, I believe that you'll probably be happy with that. I would probably stick to money line bets with this kind of thing, though. And unfortunately, if you're going money line, you're probably going Bills on that one. But I hope Locked On Commanders fans, listeners, every day, as you know, that I value being honest above all. So you kind of had to see that coming.
Wow, strong words from the gentleman who, well, both of them really, but for Locked On Commanders. But interestingly enough, I was thinking, is this going to be the week where the Commanders show improvement? You guys talked a lot about some of the positives of the Commanders, including their defensive front, as well as Eric Bieniemy continuing to evolve that offense. But this could also be an opportunity for Josh Allen and the Bills to show that, hey, we're back to playing Bills football. We're now 1-1, and we're just going to keep up with that momentum that we started in week 2.
Yeah, last week against the Raiders, everybody was running wide open. I think that Josh Allen
probably could have caught touchdown.
Look, Josh Allen was slinging the ball all over the yard, and just for him to be able to he looked like his old self, because that first week 1 he was like, we haven't seen that since rookie year. What's going on? Who's this Josh? Like, are we falling back down to earth now? But I think that the Raiders were the perfect matchup for them, and I think that they're able to take advantage of it like they were supposed to. So I think that the Bills are in a good space, and I think that the Commanders are going to have to, if they get to Josh Allen, I believe they can, because like I said, they have the rushers to be able to do so. Like we spoke about earlier, they're going to have to get this dude on the ground and make sure they put him all the way to the ground, because Josh Allen is a huge human being. Like, that's not an average size quarterback. So he will try to get that ball off, regardless if you have him hooked by the legs or not.
And Kyle, that's a great point that Jarvis makes, because the Josh Allen that we saw in week 1 was like that Josh Allen of old, the guy that we say is a turnover machine, because he had 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions in that overtime loss to the Jets, whereas we saw new look Josh Allen throw 3 touchdowns and actually come out clean with no interceptions last week against the Raiders. So is that the Josh Allen that we're absolutely going to have to see this week in order for the Bills to beat the Commanders?
I think Buffalo does have a little bit of margin for error in this game. Nobody has 4 turnover margin for error. Case in point, the way that week 1 went. And I know as well as anybody the challenges of getting Josh Allen on the ground, because Josh Allen tombstone pile drives Kyle Van Noy scrambling on the edge a few years ago against the Dolphins. And that week 3 game last year between those two teams, Buffalo with that frantic drive at the end of the game, and he's in the grass 4 times and still gets the ball out. And they try to get up and clock the ball to kick a long field. So the challenges for Josh, I think he's the most physically imposing quarterback in the league. And it's with all the ways that he plays, and you really admire the way that he lets it all hang out there, as far as being aggressive to get the first down or get the ball over the goal line or be aggressive with throws. Now, there's times where it's appropriate to do it and not. And facing New York on Monday Night Football felt like, I'm going to try to make big plays happen. We're in prime time. It's week 1. It's the season opener. We have expectations this year. Good bounce back game. It's always going to be a little bit of walking the tightrope for him to have the right balance of that mentality. But I do think Buffalo, because say what you about 1-1, they're statistically top 10 in like every major statistical category across the board on both sides of the football, from yards, points, efficiencies. Just you turn the ball over 4 times and gave a punt return for the Jets in overtime to lose a football game. So, I don't think you'll see crazy superhero Josh Allen this week. I think that they'll put more resistance up than the Raiders did last week. but I also don't think you're going to see that big regression back to kind of the roller coaster of a lot of negative self-inflicted wounds either.
Yeah. And when I look at Josh Allen, definitely, like you said, Kyle, as long as he plays a smart brand of football, as long as he plays a clean game, they should win that game, right? But if you look on the flip side with the Commanders, I think going back to Jarvis, your earlier comment about Eric Bieniemy, and we'll kind of call him a little bit of the QB whisperer, if you will. Can he put Sam Howell in a position, or will he put Sam Howell in a position if it comes to this and it's tight down the stretch in the fourth quarter for Sam Howell to be able to win the game for the Commanders?
Yeah, I think so. I believe so. I feel like there are a lot of things that are going to have to fall into place for the Commanders to be able to get that. One, they're going to have to not turn the ball over because, the Bills, look pretty suspect against the run in week 1. They tightened that up in week 2, and they were able to get some pressure on the quarterback as well. So I think that the Commander, I almost called them the Redskins. Sorry. Yeah, they're going to have to protect up front, and I think you do that by starting off by running the football and being able to establish yourself with guys like Brian Robinson. So if they're able to establish the run, make sure it's a reoccurring theme here. I understand the NFL, everybody want to throw the ball and look all cute and everything like that, but you have to be able to run the football to balance yourself out, especially when you have a young quarterback who you're trying to groom and not trying to put in a bad situation. And because play action can be your friend if you run the ball successfully. And I think that once you get those things going together, it can be a beautiful thing. And I think that if the Commanders are able to get that running game going, I really feel like they'll have a chance to at least be in this football game, and 1 or 2 explosive plays can be the difference for sure.
And we saw it up close and personal for ourselves last season when the Falcons played the Commanders, just how important, explosive, and unstoppable Brian Robinson can be. And then they got, and Antonio Gibson as well did a number on the Falcons too. So yeah, you absolutely can put the ball in the QB's hands, but to both of your points, you have to be able to at least keep those defenses honest with your run game in order for it to be competitive and in order for you not to be predictable. So it'll be an interesting game. It is one of the more intriguing matchups for the weekend. So I know I'll definitely be checking on that. But in the meantime, we want you to check out what we'll buy and what will sell maybe in the Jackson 5 coming up. I know you Saints fans are so ready to see Ross Jackson, and you will. But first, Jarvis has to tell us about Prize Picks. Jarvis
Davis here. Saints hater. No, I'm just kidding. I promise I'm just kidding. I don't hate the Saints. They're all right. They whatever. It's New Orleans, whatever. Anyway, Prize Picks is the most fun I've ever had, guys. Winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entry. So yeah, y'all got all that information about how you feel about your team and all that stuff in the Saints. Bet the over on Derek Carr in. Bet the under on interceptions. Yeah, do that. Put your money where your mouth is, because that's when it matters. So yeah, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and test your skills out. Test your team and see if you can turn $10 into $250. All you got to do is just do a few taps. Hey, find Derek Carr, see where he is, see what that over-under is on that number, and bet the over. Go with it. Yeah, I need y'all to do that. Go win some money, because all you got to do is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's all you got to do. Locked On NFL. Drop the code in. prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. And plus, guys, Prize Picks has got you covered. They're going to do everything they need to do so you can get you some money. Daily fantasy sports made easy by Prize Picks. And who doesn't need a little extra cash? We definitely appreciate that, especially the people in New Orleans, because Jarvis seems to think that our city is stinky, not good. You got comments and commentary.
Bourbon Street is a little stinky.
Yeah, I'm coming for you if you keep it up.
Smell a little bit. That's all.
Yeah. Now, Kyle, you guys are welcome to go in on the Saints all you want, but the millisecond you cross the line and go in on my city, it's going to be a problem. And you know what? I know Ross has my back on that one. But anyway, let's check out, speaking of Ross, he's our Locked On Saints host, president of all things Locked On NFL. He is Ross Jackson, and he's here with this week's Jackson 5. Okay, Ross, count them. 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness. Are there really 3 teams in the NFC South that are 2-0? Yes, there are. The Saints, the Falcons, the Bucs are all undefeated so far, but we know all 3 teams are going to have a test this coming week 3. Who goes down first to lose?
So this one's really interesting to me because I actually have all 3 teams losing this weekend. So I've got the Bucs dropping their game on Monday night to the Eagles. So technically they can't be the next NFC South or the first NFC South team to lose out of the undefeateds. So it's going to come down to a big time heat race between the New Orleans Saints, who will face the Green Bay Packers, and of course the Atlanta Falcons, who will face the Detroit Lions. Whichever one of those games hits 0 first will be your next NFC South loser, or your first NFC South loser of the 2-0 undefeated teams. But I think all 3 of them have tough games this weekend.
Absolutely. The Lions are coming off a heartbreaking loss, so I feel like they're kind of primed and ready to just get back in the win column, which means, oh goodness, the Falcons, I don't know. But I also feel like that might be a track meet. So if the Falcons lose first, it may be by default because they just run up the score and run through the game that quickly.
There you go.
But yeah, this will be an interesting one to see who actually comes out possibly 3-0, or if all 3 teams actually end this week 3 2-1. Now, speaking of another division that is actually 3-0, we're talking NFC East now, and we're talking Cowboys, we're talking Commanders, and Eagles. Now, I don't think the Eagles were a shock to anyone. Maybe not the Cowboys, the Commanders. Okay, yeah. But which one of those teams also will take their first L of the season at the ending of week 3?
Well, we just talked about the Eagles winning Monday night, so it's not going to be them. The Cowboys, despite the massive loss of Trayvon Diggs, which is huge for them, but they still have really good defensive pieces back there. Of course, Micah Parsons, who's like one of the best defenders in the NFL. They also have the Arizona Cardinals this weekend, so they're fine. So for me, it comes down to the Washington Commanders. They have the biggest test this weekend going up against the Buffalo Bills. It could be some upset material there. The Commanders will, I believe they're playing at home for that one. So there could be a little bit of an upset opportunity there, but I don't see them squeaking past a very angry Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, especially after last weekend.
Oh yeah. Angry Josh Allen. That's going to be
I don't want to see that.
Yeah. Exactly. Good luck with working through that. And good luck with kind of the head scratchers of those teams who are on the other side of this conversation, which are those teams that are 0-2. And the reason I say good luck is because a couple of them were really surprising to all of us. But for you, Ross, who was a head scratcher where you said, wow, didn't think at the end of week 2 we'd be talking about this team not having posted one in the win column?
Yeah, this one was a big one for me, and it was the Denver Broncos. I didn't see them being 0-2. They had the Raiders the first week. They had the Commanders after that. I thought that they were going to end up in a situation here where they were going to at least be 1-1. But Sean Payton coming to town, the combination of Sean Payton and Russell Wilson getting things going, letting Russ cook and all that. But so far, Russ has been maybe – he might use the microwave. He's just fixes a bowl of cereal, whatever it is. It ain't working for them right now. And so to me, that's the biggest surprise of the 0-2 teams is that Denver Broncos team led by Sean Payton. You're not used to seeing a slow start for that guy.
Yeah, when you look at his QBR rating, when you look at the percentage of completions, everything, at least on paper, looks like, okay, we're back to the Russell Wilson of old. And on some level, you are, but on the same token, not quite to the level to get you a W. So maybe it happens for them in week 3 rather. Now you have some teams out there like Carolina Panthers as an example that have a rookie quarterback under center. And it's been a challenge for him to say the least, but there are some other rookie quarterbacks out there as well who are on the struggle bus. So we're early on in the season. Only 2 weeks, 2 games in, but should any of these teams be concerned about how their rookie QBs have performed so far?
I don't think so. I really think that these are the growing pains that come with starting a rookie quarterback right out of the gate. And sometimes you get massive success from them right away. Most of the time, though, you don't. And of course, look, Carolina Panthers fans are about to get a big time realization this weekend because they're not going to see Bryce Young. They're going to see Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's been in the league a lot longer than Bryce Young, but you're going to wish Bryce Young was out on that field this weekend. So I think that when you look at where all three, particularly the three big rookie quarterbacks, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson, who of course is going through concussion protocol and all that. Yeah, these guys are just in a situation to where there's some growing pains. Anthony Richardson's usage might be something that's going to get called into question, especially with the injury and things like that. But outside of that, I think that these are teams that should play the patient route. They committed to their rookie quarterbacks as starters. They should remain committed to those rookie quarterbacks as starters and give them the opportunity to get their feet under them.
And our Jackson 5 expert, Ross Jackson, he's having a little bit of growing pains too, you guys, as a Swami, as someone who predicts, because the Bucs are 2-0. And, you know, at the end of the day, that was not quite where you had them. But, hey, you can't choose them now. So do you care to update your first-round projection? Because we kind of know what you put out there before.
Yep. I went with Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I took my crystal ball back to Bourbon Street. I had them exchange it for me. I got a new one. We're all good. And right now, it's obviously got to come down to either the Arizona Cardinals or the Chicago Bears. My favorite part about these two teams is that they will meet this season on Christmas Eve. So Christmas morning, we'll know which one of these teams has a first-round pick under the Christmas tree. That's probably going to be one of those teams that's going to end up as the first overall selection in the 2024 NFL draft at this point. I'm sorry, Bucs fans. I'm sorry.
Yes, apologies accepted on behalf of Bucs Nation. But hey, yes, we'll see right on Christmas Eve who's been naughty and who's been nice and who's going to therefore get that first overall pick. Thanks for stopping by, Ross. Jackson 5 back at you next week.
Always a pleasure.
Hey, Kyle, I want to start somewhere that I thought was interesting. And I know you guys have reaction, but there are a couple questions I wanted to ask, one for Kyle, one for Jarvis. So Kyle, one of the things that Ross mentioned was the play of the rookie quarterbacks. Now, honestly, we know Anthony Richardson's down because of concussion protocol. And we also now know that Bryce Young is officially not going to go this weekend. But in looking at what they've been able to do or not do from this class of the quarterbacks from 2023, right? So Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. And then you look at 2022, Brock Purdy's up here, but we talked about Sam Howell a little bit. We talked about Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, still kind of to be determined. And we still have not had any real sightings of Malik Willis. Looking at class of 2022, looking at class of 2023, where's your surprise, and which team should just stick it out and just stick with their guy?
Well, I don't think it's a surprise that you look at the group that had 3 first-round picks and you feel better about that class in its totality, which was this past year's group, because look, Bryce Young's working with both hands tied behind his back as far as the receiving core that's available. They've had major injuries on the interior offensive line. I know both their guards right now are down. That's not a winning recipe for a player who probably does have to recondition himself for the way he played and got outside the pocket and moved around and made things happen with his legs. Everybody's a little faster in the NFL. And you see Bryce is kind of figuring that out as he tries to get off script and extend plays, but his receivers just aren't getting open.
Yeah.
So that's a really hard situation to evaluate objectively the play of Bryce Young. Now, I would say out of the 3 quarterbacks in this year's class, Bryce is the one who I think has the least margin for error with his physical skills. And you contrast that to Anthony Richardson and how good he looked with 2 15-plus yard touchdown runs against Houston last week before he had the concussion that knocked him out of the game. You look at CJ Stroud throwing for over 380 yards because he is the traditional pocket passer who gets the ball out of his hands. And Houston, even though they've endured a lot of injuries on their own offensive line, they kept swinging. They kept bringing guys in. They were trading for Josh Jones from the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, they legit brought in 5-6 offensive linemen to try to say, hey, this is our guy. We're invested here. So I think you see optimism for all of the rookies from this year's class. As far as somebody from last year's class who I think needs to stick with it, I think about what Atlanta is doing. And they are a team that does mitigate the quarterback position. They don't throw the ball downfield. I said earlier in the show this week, that I admire the way that they play offensively because they don't panic when they're down 2 scores. We still got time. Now, if you're in a 4-minute offense situation, you need to drive the length of the field at the end of a game. I don't like your chances to execute that because Desmond Ridder hasn't necessarily done that. That's not really their DNA of who they are. But as they continue to build forward, Desmond Ridder has the opportunity to be a player, kind of like what Dak Prescott was in Dallas when he first came in as a rookie. And he didn't have to do too much at first. And their identity was in the run game. And as he matured, their offense evolved. And I think the Falcons have the skill player pieces to do that. It's just a matter of let's be who we are. And as our quarterback matures, we can continue to build around him. I think they have a good blueprint to do it. It's just this hard dynamic of you're in year 3 of a head coach. You're probably going to want to see more wins this year than you've had where you had 2 consecutive 7-win seasons. So there's a little bit of pressure to win. But I think the situation is good, and it's just on Atlanta to stay true to their process and hope that they have enough wins in the meantime to allow that process to fully play itself out.
And to add to that, another quarterback in that particular class as well is Kenny Pickett. Like, look at the weapons. George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Freiermuth. You know, you have Najee Harris and even Jalen Warren, who's been coming along, catching the ball out of catching the ball out of the backfield. There's just so many guys that he's surrounded with, but it just doesn't seem quite right. And T, I think you made a great point. And I think Matt Canada might be the reason why. And I think that, you know, Mike Tomlin, like, he's the epitome of loyalty. Like, the opportunities he's had to throw players under the bus for just being straight up bad people in the locker room in the past years, and we're not finding out that stuff until they're long gone and retired. Like, he just is so loyal. And I think, and I'm just trying to figure out why he's so loyal to that guy. So I think that they need to, if they're going to stick with Kenny Pickett, they need to switch some things up from a play calling standpoint. And I think that it's going to have to take, I feel like you can't really do that in the season because, you know, like, that stuff can get messy. And the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't that type of organization. Like, they aren't going to be out there like that. So I think it's going to be a matter of Tomlin going to Canada saying, hey, man, here's what we need to do. Here's what, I'm not telling you what to call, but I need to, these play calls, these game plans, they need to be centered around this. They need to be centered around Najee Harris. They need to be centered around Kenny Pickett, getting him some easy throws to the tight end so you can get that offense moving down the field, to get into some old school play action, like what we're used to seeing with that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So I think that, you know, if they can just stick, if they're going to stick with Kenny Pickett, which I feel they should, and he was on the first round quarterback that year for a reason, they need to Mike Tomlin needs to make sure that Canada is putting this dude in the right position to be successful.
Can I piggyback off of offensive coaching? Because I know very well what it's like to have a young quarterback with a coaching staff that just refuses to put any competent offensive coaching around him. Tua Tagovailoa, his first 2 years with Brian Flores, amidst all of the Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson rumors, averaged 194 passing yards a game. 194 his first 2 seasons. In the 15 games he started with Mike McDaniel, he is averaging 285 passing yards a game, almost 100 more passing yards per game. And he's leading the league in passer efficiency since that time, his passer rating, his adjusted net yards per attempt as far as efficiency when you factor in sacks and throwaways and turnovers and touchdowns. It's the best in the NFL with Mike McDaniel. Now, some of that's Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, that's fine, but we just got done complimenting the skill players that Pittsburgh has. And the ability to tie it all together is an essential piece. And until there's continuity for the sake of continuity, and then there's continuity because it's beneficial. And it feels like Pittsburgh had continuity just for the sake of continuity because they didn't want to go back to square one and start all over again. And I get that's detrimental to young quarterbacks, but so is playing multiple years in this system that's just so vanilla that you present very little in the way of challenges for pre-snap, what your possibilities and what your menu is based on your formation and the game situation.
I love what you said about just having an understanding of how to really utilize all the pieces in your offense, because I think the Dolphins are a nice blueprint. And in addition to what you have in the wide receiver core, you actually are using Raheem Mostert like you should use him, because he's averaging 5.6 yards every time he touches the ball. And that's what you want to see. And he's punching it in as well. So, yeah, I think that when you look at the two classes, and maybe I agree that the quarterbacks that you want to stick with are Desmond Ridder and Kenny Pickett because of what you can see in what if, well, I think Desmond Ridder has the right people because Arthur Smith is running that offense with Dave Ragone, but Kenny Pickett probably needs somebody. But to your point, Kyle, once Tua got not just the pieces on the field that were right for him, but also the pieces to actually take advantage of them with the coaching staff, then that's when you kind of saw all of the pieces kind of click, if you will. So yeah, I love kind of that analogy that you made there, because it definitely does make a difference. Now, listen, we have spoken about our bottom three teams over and over and over again. So I'm chuckling because I'm thinking to myself, when Ross was talking about his bottom three teams to start off, the Buccaneers were right there in the mix. He actually had to fall on the sword during the Jackson 5 and say, maybe I was wrong. Maybe they're not going to get that number one pick. So what do you guys think about that in terms of, is there any team that maybe in the first 2 weeks, you guys are like, yeah, no, I don't think that's going to work. You know, they're bad, but you're like, now we're going into week 3. Maybe I kind of underestimated them. I don't know. Maybe they're not bottom dwellers.
Las Vegas is that team for me, where pretty skeptical of Josh McDaniels and the system in year 2 and the Patriot way, doing it elsewhere. But the offensive lines played pretty well. I know they didn't run for anything at all in week 2 against Buffalo, but from a pass blocking perspective, they're executing pretty well. Was concerned about what they really had there. Some guys overachieved last year, like Jermaine Illuminor. Can you bank on them again? Well, the unit as a whole has executed pretty well. You have Max Crosby, obviously, on the defensive side of the ball. They have a win already. They weren't overly competitive. They put a nice opening script together against Buffalo. They went down and scored a touchdown on the opening possession last week. So they're a team that I just look across the space at some of the teams that are 0-2, Chicago, Arizona. I have big time concerns with Carolina right now. And they're a team that, like, they lost Shaq Thompson to injury too. JC Horn's on IR. They're really banged up. So I think Las Vegas, even if they don't surpass their win total from last year, I thought they might be a candidate to win 3-4 games this year. I think they'll probably get over that. I think they're a team that has shown a little bit more life versus my concerns on the offensive side of the ball, which is ironic because they had a horrible running game performance in week 2. Yeah.
How about you, Jarvis? What team is the one where first week, second week, you were like, yeah, they are bottom dwellers, but maybe now you're rethinking that?
Oh, wow, this is an interesting one, because I coming into the season, I thought the Patriots were going to be, that type team, because it just, like, with all the bad, drafting on the defensive side of the football with Bill Belichick, it just seems like, hey, they just can't figure it out. And then, deciding to put a defensive coordinator, and offensive coordinator and with a young quarterback, on top of that, compounding that error. It just seems like, and bringing in a guy like Bill O'Brien, like I called him the stabilizer earlier on, so I'm going to give him a little bit more credit as well, too. It just seems like, hey, they're starting to look like the Patriots a little bit. They are looking like a team that, hey, they can come out there and say, you know what, you're going to have to beat us today. We're not going to beat ourselves. Our offensive coordinator is going to make sure our quarterback is put in the right situations, and we're not going to turn the ball over. And then, hey, just look out for our special teams, too, because we're going to be able to make plays on that as well. So I think that the Patriots are a team that I was like, oh, you know what? They might have a chance to replace Mac Jones, but, I'm starting to scoot towards, hey, they might be at least a solid team.
Yeah. We'll see after both teams play week 3, we'll see how they do, and we'll see if we're putting them back in as bottom dwellers. Now, it's the final stretch for this NFL Kickoff Live crew, but if you're hungry in the final stretch, you probably want to hear about DoorDash.
I don't know about you all, but sometimes I'll be sitting at the house, and I may have eaten dinner maybe a few hours earlier, but I just get that feeling in my stomach, and it's just like, I'm hungry. I know I'm hungry, and I've been working out and all that stuff, so maybe it's my appetite. My appetite is going up. So guess what? To thirst that appetite, I go to DoorDash. Yes, I said it right, DoorDash. And sometimes I want to cook, so you can get your groceries. Guess what? You can get them, your trusted DoorDash, to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can get grocery delivered right to your door. I know I don't like grocery shopping because, it just takes too long and all that stuff. You can eliminate all of those issues, all of those concerns, all of those worries by going to DoorDash, because you have thousands of grocery stores to choose from, and you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. So get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code Locked On NFL at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. Yes, that's 50% off up to $20. No minimum subtotal. That's very important. And 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code Locked On NFL.
Indeed. Now, there are some people that might be in trouble as far as their fantasy football and their fantasy league goes. And it may be some time to make some moves, but Michelle Majuk is actually going to tell us about which players you may need to sell now to salvage.
Three guys I'm selling high on that I believe are pretenders, and moving forward, their value is going to decline a bit here. So first up is Dolphins running back Raheem Mostert. I know it's really hard to sell a running back who's getting volume and looking so good, but I fear his fantasy success won't last long. So Mostert has never had more than 181 carries in a single season throughout his career, right? And he's 31 years old now. I doubt this is a year that his body can finally hold up. Plus, he's been the only healthy back in this Dolphins backfield, and they're going to be getting back Jeff Wilson Jr. and Salman Ahmed from injury soon here. Third-round rookie running back Devin Achane, he dealt with a shoulder injury in the preseason. He should see his workload increase as he gets further away from that injury. So I am going to sell high on Mostert now while he's had back-to-back great fantasy weeks. Another guy I am looking to sell high on is Buccaneers running back Rachaad White. So he had a great performance against a very terrible Chicago Bears defense last week, right? But even then, his efficiency still wasn't that great. He is getting the volume, but White has been one of the least efficient running backs since entering the NFL last season. So his 3.6 yards per carry ranks 47th among 49 running backs with 100 plus carries. And his 5.8 yards per reception ranks 18th among 20 running backs with 50 plus receptions since 2022. His schedule gets harder coming up here. He gets the Eagles, the Saints, and then a bye week. So over the next 3 weeks, you might not want to play him whatsoever. It could be a good month before he has another good fantasy day. Take this opportunity and sell high on Rachaad White now. You might not get another chance. And then last up, this name hurts me to say, but it's Jets wide receiver Garrett Wilson. We know he's insanely talented, right? And that's why you might be able to sell him high now. It cannot be overstated just how terrible this Aaron Rodgers injury is for Garrett Wilson's fantasy production this season. He went from a guy that had serious top 3 fantasy wide receivers ceiling this year to a guy that's going to be lucky to finish in the top 12, top 15 this year. He has saved his fantasy day each of the last 2 weeks with Zach Wilson by scoring a touchdown. We know in week 1, he basically had to intercept a terrible ball thrown by Zach Wilson to score the touchdown. And then last week, he was only able to connect on 2 of his 8 targets with Zach Wilson. And he just happened to take one of them to the house for a 68-yard touchdown because he's super talented. But he's not going to be able to do that every single week. So I think right now is a great time to sell high on Garrett Wilson. Well, he still has that huge name value, right? And he still has all the talent, but I don't think he's going to be super consistent with Zach Wilson. So this doesn't mean sell him for anything, but go sell him high now while you still can.
Wow. Wasn't expecting that, especially when you talked about Garrett Wilson. When Michelle mentioned Garrett, I was thinking to myself, oh boy, because like she said, he's uber talented. But the reality is Garrett Wilson can be as talented as he wants, but he can't get you 6 points if that guy, Zach Wilson, is throwing to him. So thoughts, Kyle, on what he said, or Jarvis, whoever wants to go first, because it's like you guys are chomping at the bit.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson is an interesting one because I have him on my team. So there's a little personal connection there. So it's just like, all right, like I really feel like if the Jets don't go out and get someone, because I've always talked about how you can't go back to Zach Wilson because there were so many factors. Because from a teammate standpoint, when they were talking about bringing Aaron Rodgers, come on up to New York and all this stuff and trying to get him to going to his house and visiting with him and all this texting back and forth saying, "Hey, big head, come on down here." So I think it was just too many scenarios or situations where Zach Wilson, regardless of how he plays, like he's not going to be able to win that locker room over. And I think that Robert Saleh needs to go out and go try to possibly get a quarterback to at least be able to compete if Zach Wilson continues to look like Zach Wilson. And we know that he's going to look like Zach Wilson. So, yeah, if I'm very much considering trading Garrett Wilson to see what I can get back in return.
I'd fade Rachaad White. I agree with that one. Just again, we talked about Tampa and the teams that they've played and their ability to really accentuate the weakness that we perceive on that Tampa Bay offense and that offensive line. And if we're already sub 4 yards per carry and this was the big breakout game with the touchdown run, anything you get there is probably something I would jump at. I am a little interested to see how Raheem Mostert, his workload is carried. He was the guy down the stretch for the Dolphins last year too. And he ran really hard. He ended up having a wrist injury, I want to say, in week 17 or week 18 against the Jets. And it that kind of prematurely ended his season when they went to the playoffs. But he is somebody who Miami and this offense, he added 10 pounds of weight this offseason, kind of bulked himself up for intention of carrying a bigger workload. And he's still the second GPS fastest time of any ball carrier through the first 2 weeks of the season. So Devon Achane, I know they spent a 3rd round pick on. He was behind Savon Ahmed all of training camp. So I would not be surprised if he doesn't. Now Ahmed's banged up right now with a groin injury, but I wouldn't be surprised if it takes him a while, Ahmed or Achane, to build into that role that a lot of people envisioned that he was going to have on the team. Jeff Wilson coming back off of IR in the next potentially 2 weeks could provide some kind of ding, but if Raheem Mostert's going to be an RB2 for a fantasy squad, I think you could do a whole lot worse. So he's somebody I'd probably want to see him through just because teams are going to be continued to try to dedicate taking away 10 and 17 on the outside. And when you do that, you're going to get light boxes. And you saw that, the Dolphins were able to big boy the Patriots down the stretch in the running game last week. If it was not for a muffed snap on 3rd and 1 down the stretch, the Patriots don't have that frantic drive to close the game at the end of the game after this field goal because they were running the ball down the Patriots' throats. And you don't see a lot of teams that have the ability to do that. I think they took advantage of how New England was trying to attack coverage. And then you got late in the game and they just leaned on them and you hit an explosive run. And in fantasy, all it takes is one. It's 10 points.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's absolutely. Now, we talked about this, and I'm going to go back to this just as we wrap up. And of course, you guys, if you have any closing thoughts that you want to talk about, this is the time to chime in with those. But going back to the teams that are 2-0, Cowboys, Ravens, Dolphins, Eagles, Commanders, Falcons, Bucs, and Saints. Which one of those teams can be 1, 2, or all come out 3-0 at the end of week 3?
I think the Falcons be a candidate for that because, like I said, I really feel like they're going to go up there with a really good game plan. They're getting potentially can have a guy like Jeff Okudah, a former first round pick, highly touted coming out of Ohio State. Now, granted, he didn't play like that. That's why he didn't end up signing back with the Lions. But there is something there, and we've seen how this Falcon secondary has looked, without him, and it's been pretty doggone solid. So I think that if they can go up there, they have potentially the opportunity to go up to Detroit and, put some points on the board and be able to come out with a win on the road.
I think you end up with 5. Obviously, Philadelphia and Tampa Bay play each other, so somebody's going to come out of that unless they tie. Heaven forbid it. We hate ties in this house. We hate ties. I think Philadelphia wins that absolutely. One. Dallas, the Trayvon Diggs thing's a big gut punch for them, but they're playing Arizona this week. I still think Dallas takes care of business. We already have San Francisco with the Thursday night win against the Giants. And then I think both AFC teams win their games as well, which is Baltimore against the Indianapolis Colts. We don't know who's behind center for that with Richardson and concussion protocol, and then the Dolphins at home against the Broncos. So I think you have Dolphins, Ravens on the AFC side of things, and then Eagles, Cowboys, 49ers on the NFC side of things. I think those are the teams that are undefeated after week 3.
Yeah, and I would say I agree with Ross's entire list, but I would also have to take from Jarvis's list of the Falcons as well. I think they're going to pull it out and they're going to surprisingly be on the side of 3-0. But you know what we're going to do next week, right? We're going to run this tape back and we're going to figure out who was right and who was wrong, because it's the NFL and it's been kind of a wacky season already. The fact that we're talking about some of those teams being 2-0 and, like we've said earlier, some of the teams being 0-2. Real quick, guys, you got 30 seconds. Kyle, give us your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is a really good week to kind of get the sample size where you need it for that middle pack. I think a lot of these 2-0s and some of these 0-2s, a lot of times you got what you thought you did. Some of these teams in the middle ground, you could tell me a team's 22nd, or you can tell me they're 11th or 10th or 9th. And I believe you. You know, you have a legitimate argument. So this is kind of where rubber meets the road a little bit. You get a little bit of separation here this week. Should be fun.
Jarvis, give us your quick close.
Yeah, just the fact that, there are a lot of teams that are going to be tested for the first time this week because of, the uncertainty that's been early on in the NFL season. So it's going to be exciting to watch.
Indeed. Exciting. Indeed. We appreciate you guys because we think we're exciting to watch right here on NFL Kickoff Live. Best football talk every single Friday, every team, every game, breaking news. We got it all. I'm your host, Tanisha Batiste, Kyle Krabs, and Jarvis Davis. Appreciate you guys coming back to us each and every week. Have a great weekend.